Okay, so part 2, and I want to complete here in order for the student to, in order to do the approaches to learning, here to identify the approaches to learning skill that you want to develop for your students, you have to identify the strand taken for your subject guide. So let's say that I am in year 3. I could use here like the strand for criterion C, for instance, and I could take it here, but actually I could use also like in the guide over the grid, the rubric. There is the same thing which is presented in another way, like the student is able to do something. So if I copy paste that, so here I can go back to my unit plan. So I could say, in order for student to present work that is consistently organized using a logical structure, which is actually our, here it was C5, so I could write it down. It's an option that I have. I decided to do it in order for it to be clear. Students must, and then I go in my MYP from principles into practice guide, and then I can identify here, organize. Well, I have here also like structure, information, and summaries, essay, report, but here let's say organize and depict information logically. So I could write this down here. So then I would have my sentence, but I'll have to identify also my skill cluster, which would be communication, and here actually the category, the skill category, which is communication, and also the skill cluster, which is communication skills. So I know that's about the same for that one, but not for all of these. Okay, so if you go, you'll have here later reflection skills, of course, but here let's say in thinking skills, you could use critical thinking skills, which we often used. Let's say for criterion B, test generalization and conclusions, or draw reasonable conclusions and generalizations. So that these are things that we use also in mathematics. So often what I suggest is within your department, like all of the mathematics teachers can identify strands which might be interesting, not strand, but indicators which are interesting to develop, and to try to plan the development over the 5 years of the MYP. So once you've done that, actually, what we'd like to have, and it was written in that way also in the template, is to plan an explicit learning activity and an implicit learning activity. So here underneath, the difference between the two. It's written also in the module notes. I could present, let's say, something which is planned. It's not necessarily about mathematics. Let's say I have a story and have to organize information logically and just try to sort it like in the right order. That could be an explicit learning activity for the students to understand that the order in which you present information is important. And then the implicit learning activity, you could apply this skill to mathematics. So you have a mathematics task. There is the lines of reasoning and trying to organize them in a logical structure. So that would be like a second activity. But this is not the summative task. But that skill that you have developed will be transferred in the summative task at the end. So the idea is, whatever you do, you try to present the activity explicitly in order for them to understand how to use that skill, whether it is in mathematics or in another subject. Once you have presented and done an activity in order to develop the skill, no matter the subject, and you can go back and try to do an activity, transfer that skill in your subject, so in mathematics, and then you have to transfer it a second time, and that time would be like at the end in the summative task. They should be ready, they should know how to do it. It's not supposed to be a surprise. So this is the idea about teaching and learning. So I have to go back, I'm sorry, here, it's not here. to the workshop in the third learning engagement activity. It is about differentiation and inclusion. So I have given you, like, there are 4 groups, there are 4 scenarios, and there is an idea, a way in which is presented, in which the student can be included and differentiated. And there is one of the research from the IB, which is meeting student learning diversity, which is interesting. So the idea is to try to share ideas about how, in this context scenario, you could try to find one other way to include and one other way to differentiate for the students. So this is an activity which is not directly related to your unit plan, but as I've said before, in the last column of the action section, you have to think about how you can differentiate your activity. In the learning activities, so in the learning engagement 4, this, which is the last, we are trying to complete the other parts of the unit plan. So here, once again, in that part, my expectation is for all of you to share your unit plan. I know it will not be perfect. We are not expected to give perfect unit plans when we start to build it. Often takes 2-3 years in order for it to be really good. But of course, you can complete it, and then later you take a look at it using the Evaluating MYP Unit Plans guide in order to try to see if you are at the sharing level, and then you can modify it in order to try to make it better and better. So it is something which is dynamic and which will evolve through time. Of course, we ask you to take a look at that guide in order to make sure that you are following the guidelines. So here, it's mainly used in the module notes to complete the action part, as I've said before. So I'll come back here to my unit plan and just summarize what we've done. We have identified the concepts. We have identified the global context exploration. If you were using my copy, at the end, don't forget that you can select it and just erase the line. Sorry, here, let's say like that. And at the end, it's going to be a neat unit plan. Same thing. Using the key concept and related concepts and the global context exploration, we have built a statement of inquiry. Then, in Module 4, we have asked at least one general question about the concepts for each category, like factual, conceptual, indebutable, and the same thing, and we can also ask questions about the global context exploration. So often I ask questions about the global context exploration in factual questions about that, actually. So here the subject is not included to foster interdisciplinary activities and projects. Then here, the summative assessment. You've done that in Module 3. So you have planned which criteria you are going to evaluate and which authentic task you are going to give to your students. And also you had to explain the relationship, to describe the relationship actually between the summative assessment, which is here, and your statement of inquiry, which is here. And that's why I often copy paste it in that box, so it's easier for me to make the relationship between the two. So here we had that done as well. Then in the approaches to learning skills, well, it's what we just did. So you just have to explain shortly what is the explicit learning activity and implicit learning activity, knowing that these activities are going to be shared in a chart, a school chart about the planning of the approaches to learning in order for all the teachers to be able to use what the other teachers have taught and also to share what they are teaching so that the other teachers can use these skills, knowing how the students have learned these. Then, service as action is optional. If there is an opportunity, as we have taught before in Module do, I think. We're trying to think about if our task could lead to services action, or later on, if the global context exploration, for instance, have sensitized the students to something, and then the students, you can offer opportunities so that some students choose to take action upon that. So if you use it, you can write it, then else you can completely erase these lines if you want. Then we go at the action section, and as I said before, we can add as many rows as we want, so you just add rows underneath, and then you have your whole sequence of learning process, which is here. So using the content, you ask questions. If we don't ask questions, it's not likely that we would use inquiry, and then you plan activity, 1, 2 activities for that question, and then formative assessment and differentiation. What I could add is that the skills, not communication, but the skill that you want to develop here, the activities, so the skill can be and have to be included here. The student has to organize. What you want to learn here is to organize and depict information logically. So that is actually like content, the skill. And then you will say how you use the explicit and implicit activity in order to teach these skills. So that's something that we would do. And if it is like not at the same time, if let's say we start with the explicit activity and later on we do the implicit activity, then it would be 2 rows. And here again, when we do these activities, the idea is to be able to assess if the students understood and is able to apply these skills. So we have to plan some way of verifying that in the formative assessment column. And we can also differentiate the skills. Perhaps that for some students, we would give them template in order for them to have something which would help the students to use these skills, because perhaps they're not all at the same level, and perhaps we would challenge some students as well. And challenging students is another way of differentiating. So we are taking into consideration the students that have different needs, and also we want to offer challenges to the students who are perhaps more gifted. So this is the content, and this is the main part actually of the unit, because it's all related to our mathematics. So if you say, well, in the first part, I don't feel that I put much mathematics, it's because it's here. Here it is the action. Here it is what is going on in class. Here it is, and read again, teaching, learning through inquiry. So everything which is not related to the IB, you can go very fast in your description. What we would verify as a visitor is to see if you have implemented the approaches to teaching in your teaching here in the action content, and then we would verify if you do it for real when we visit the school in your class. So then at the end, sorry, I'm going to the end. You give the resources, of course, and then there is the reflection part, which we could also do. For now, you do the prior, if you want, before you teach. And there are questions, many questions that are asked. You just have to try to think about that, including how you would consider the IB learner profile. And then when you teach a unit, you can take some notes and then write what you would do next time. So I hope that helped a lot in understanding all the parts of the unit plan. Final thing is the conclusion. Please share one thing that you want to do, engage on doing from now on after this workshop. And I was really happy to join you in that adventure. So take care, and perhaps we'll meet later on. Thank you.